Hi everyone, welcome to episode 13 of Cloud Conversations with Rue and Pete. I'm the Rue of the Rue and Pete, and I'm joined with fellow beardy guy, Pete. Pete, how are you?
Hello, the Rue. I am the Pete. Yes, indeed, fellow beardy guy, a very fellow hot beardy guy today in the sweaty sense, not in the appealing sense. But but yeah, things are good. Things are good, other than just melting. How are you? You good?
Yeah, all good here. Not melting up here. It's nice and overcast. Kind of natural IT guy habitat. Don't like the outside. Stay inside. Nice and cool. Yeah,
but anyway, this is where we up to. We are up to show number 13 of Cloud Conversations with Rue and Pete. Can't believe we're up to 13 already. Hopefully it won't be an unlucky one for us. I'm sure it won't. I don't see how it could be with our guest today being the absolutely amazing Mr. Paul Dredge. Welcome, Paul. How are you today, my friend?
Very well, thank you. Great to be here, guys. I mean, it's a privilege to be on your show. We'll say that, and do tune in a lot to watch yours. So it's great to be on number 13. Hopefully not unlucky. Hopefully there's no mix-ups on my part to ruin yours. But yeah, great to be here today.
Oh, fantastic! Thank you so much for joining us. So let's get cracking then. Let's have a chat. And if you would you introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers? Tell us a bit about yourself and who you are, where you're from, what you do, and how you've got to where you are.
Yeah, brilliant. We'll do. So Paul Dredge. I currently work for a company here in the UK called Hable. We are an adoption change management partner of Microsoft, a gold partner, the whole shebangs you get with being a partner. So the company I work for, we really focus on how people think about technology and want to change their opinions of it. Been with them for 2 years. And prior to that, I came from an education background. So I started off as traditional IT technician and worked my way up to sort of teacher role, IT administrator of an academy trust. Met the owner of Hable, Mark, got chatting to him, and then joined them. So my journey's been a bit of a mixed one along the way, of different kinds of tech to people to teaching to all sorts of weird things along that way. From the Midlands, although the shirt's in the background, you probably wouldn't guess that, but from the Midlands area in Northamptonshire. And that's me. I mean, very recently awarded MVP for Microsoft. So great thing to be a part of the community officially. Thank you, Peter. So yes, I'm now an official member of the MVP community.
Yeah, a newly minted MVP, absolutely deserved. I couldn't be happier for you. And tell us a little bit about your journey with the program. What does it mean to you, and who's most inspired you along the way in this journey?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it means an awful lot. So coming from the IT technician background, like many times as all IT technicians, you're strolling through forums trying to find how to do things. And there's always these gurus that we're seeing in my eyes of these MVPs who are like way up in the podiums of knowing the Jedi masters, I like to call them, of IT, that knew a lot more than us normal IT technicians sort of at the bottom of the pile scrapping around on our Google searches. So to be recognized as someone now who is an MVP means a massive amount to me. Never ever dreamed about being part of the MVP community or being an MVP. I said, came from education background, so I was involved a lot with the Microsoft world of what they call the Microsoft Innovative Educator community. A bit of a mouthful, but in this community that you get awarded, it's similar to like the MVP community, but it was more of a teaching and learning side, but how to use tech and so on. So I've been a part of that community for about 5-6 years. And then when I joined Hable, I sort of took a step away from working in education, still work with some customers, but it was a bit like still part of that community, but didn't really feel like I fitted in with the community because I wasn't teaching or involved in the school scene as much. And then the MVP sort of thing got mentioned. I was like, nah, I'll never get to that standard of things. And just as I started working with Hable and being exposed to more, I remember having a chat with Chris Huntingford on a call at one point, partner call, when he was talking about the communities and stuff. He's like, well, you should check out the MVP stuff. So went away, researched a little bit about how the process is involved. My boss, line manager Sean O'Shea from Hable, is very heavily involved in Microsoft, so he knows quite a lot of people in the Microsoft world of things. So I got speaking to a few different people in Microsoft about it, and then trying to find that space. I remember having a conversation with Claire. I did get nominated early on last year, but I didn't really understand what was involved in the nomination. Very new to it, so I didn't get accepted in my first nomination. Putting in the contributions and so on. But then I got speaking to Chris Horde, who introduced me to yourself, Peter, as well. And after speaking to you guys were the real ones that actually helped me along the way to talk to me about what I should be doing, how to do it, made me feel part of the community with Teams Nation and so on. And then that's sort of evolved from there. And here I am now, successfully after a second nomination as an MVP.
Nice one. Awesome stuff. And I guess, when we talk about the kind of things that MVPs do, speaking at conferences, blogging, tweeting, all that kind of stuff, where do you kind of lean in regards to all that? Because I know that some folks exclusively speaking, less the blogging. Where do you kind of find yourself contributing there?
Yeah, so probably more in the speaking sense. I try to blog, but I always find when I'm trying to blog, it's a lot of work to blog. I'm not the best writer in the world. So when I am blogging, I'm either writing short blogs, which are just like updates from the Microsoft Center or just stuff I've picked up on recently. I don't tend to write long blogs. So I find the speaking part becomes a lot more natural to me. Although if you'd asked me 2-3 years ago about speaking in front of people, I'm like, no, not me. I'm not that type of guy. No chance. So put me in front of people who I'll just panic and go all croaky voiced. Whereas now I love just being in front of people talking, especially at events and things, just sharing that knowledge that I have and learning from others as well. It's just brilliant. Also have YouTube, find talking on video, similar to events, talking on video, a lot easier than writing things.
Nice, cool. Why do you think that is? Because obviously, I kind of know what you mean insofar as when I'm writing a blog, I'd sit down and I plan to maybe spend an hour on it, and then 5 hours later, I'm still fixing typos and all sorts of rubbish in it. Do you find speaking just more natural?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've done a few events where you record the sessions as well, pre-record, and I always find as well with them, you always wanting that perfect thing, aren't you? And you edit and so on. Whereas when you're doing it live, it's like it just flows. If you make a mistake, you just carry on. So I think it's that element where when you're speaking at events, it's just you can just talk, you can just go with the flow of it. Whereas with like blogs, I think I'm very critical myself. I write something, I'm like, that's absolute nonsense. People are going to read that and think like a school kid's written it, because writing is not my strong point. And I just think there's so many more people out there that can probably write a hell of a lot better than me and get you engaged to it, whereas my writing side of things isn't the best. So when I do try and blog, I like to still do it, but you'll never find me writing a big article probably, just because it would take me forever and I have to get about 10 people to proof check it for me because I'm never confident before pressing that publish button.
Well, that's the daunting thing about when you publish a blog. It's like, oh my God, that's going to be out there forever. And if I made a mistake in it, then what kind of MVP am I? You know what I mean? If I'm tweeting out information that isn't so accurate. Yeah. Whereas at least when it's live, and certainly on YouTube, and I know in this podcast, we kind of, if it's rough and if the production isn't smooth and if there's umming and emming and amming and all sorts of stuff that doesn't sound so polished, folk don't really care as much as you think these days. At least that's our experience.
Oh, definitely. I mean, and hopefully that's the case as well, because with me, as many people will know, I'm twitchy. I've got Tourette syndrome for those who don't know. So I sniff a lot and cough a lot and clear my throat a lot. So but everyone's always very kind about it, which is great. Interesting a point I want to pick up on, Paul, that you mentioned there, and want to know how it is for both you guys here, really. No matter the pressure that you put yourselves under to do the perfect blog, do the perfect talk, that sort of thing, do you usually find that the response to what you've done far outweighs the expectation that you had for it? Because people are so kind to me, and I think, well, wow, what have I done here? I've not invented penicillin. It's just, but they're always so really nice and grateful for the content you put out and really happy.
Definitely. I find in talks, like, I don't really rehearse talks. I know lots of people out there do spend quite a lot of time rehearsing what you say. I'll run through, if I've got slides, make sure if I'm doing a live demo, I know what I'm doing and so on. But I'm not one that sits there and reads through things and keeps practicing as such. I just sort of go with it, and if it works, it works. If it's a complete car crash, then I'm sure I'll know about it. But like you say there, Peter, I've touch wood, I've never had anyone say, oh, that was awful, or it wasn't as good as I think it's going to be. It's always that, wow, this is brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing. Learned so much, amazing stuff, amazing content. And same with blogs. You do blog things, and I speak to people and like, oh, that blog was really useful that I read. Didn't know that update or how to do that thing with Teams or whatever it is I'm blogging about. But you do though, don't you? You do put yourself under that pressure all the time around this sort of stuff. Especially now, I'm sure I'd be even worse in the MVP limelight. I'm like, well, I'm MVP. I'm representing the top of the class now. I'm gonna have to be at my own game to be up here with everyone.
Yeah, the mind monkeys get worse. Trust me, they really do.
Yeah, definitely hear that. Insofar, like when it comes to speaking, it's kind of like if you're confident in what you're talking about anyway, you can. I don't want to say you can wing it, but you put together your slides and you're just building it up in your head and you're thinking what you're going to say anyway. I don't like the idea of sitting for an hour or two and just rehearsing this perfect speech. You're not an actor. You're a presenter, and it's a bit different. And it'll probably come across as obvious if you're just rehearsing lines, you know what I mean, and you'll stumble and all that kind of stuff. At least I would. I know when I did my Teams Nation one just the other month, it was kind of like, well, number one, I lost my voice about 3 minutes before I started presenting.
You did really well. You did really well.
I thought I was going to die. I was like, what on earth is going on here? But then, I just kind of suffered for a few minutes and then it went away. But I know that if I'd have sat there and rehearsed and just kind of read from a script, it would have been a disaster. Because you start fumbling and then you're like, oh, I've got to find what I was going to say and yada, yada, yada.
I remember my first ever, I think it was a webinar I did from Microsoft. It must be 4 or 5 years ago now, and I wrote not a script word for word, but I remember having on a piece of paper next to my Surface like a things that I was talking about and some sentences. And I'd hate if that I don't even know if it exists on the internet. I'd hate to see that, because I probably was like a robot. Like, now we click here. This is the button that does this. I'd hate to rewatch that. Thankfully, I never have. But looking back from then, confidence of doing it, like I say, getting your skill set up and your knowledge around that subject and feeling comfortable about what you're talking about, I think is the main thing that helps you with it.
Yeah, definitely. I'm taking a bit of a break from speaking right just now because I've just had so much lately. It's just been one after the other. So I'm having a little bit of a rest. I'm not going to do anything potentially till about September when the next things are coming up, potentially. But I'm trying to remember the point I was going to make, but it's completely gone, which is very irritating. But
I'll jump in.
I'll try and think what I was going to say.
Do you think it's a case of burnout then from the speaking? Like, is it just too much in such a small space of time? Because
I think, and I've just remembered what I was going to say, and I think the reason is basically because I'm so disorganized. I need to get better organized, because it would come to the point where my wife would ask me, "What have you got on today?" And I don't know. And I look at my calendar. Oh God, I'm speaking today, and I've not got any slides. So, do you ever find that yourself, that you're just completely unprepared for talking? You just knock a few slides together and bish bash bosh, and you just wing it? Because I do that a lot, even to the point now where I can't even be bothered to put too many slides together. And I think some events they do want you to lean more into demos anyway and have more practical stuff going on. So which works well for me. I'll just put a few token slides together. This is me. This is my Twitter. How you can reach me. This is what we're going to talk about. Right, in the demo. This is the good stuff.
Yeah, I'm with you on the disorganized side of things. Organization skills are terrible. With the slides, I always leave everything to last minute. I'm one of these guys you think, I've got ages till that event or ages to that presentation. And you're like, oh, bugger, it's tomorrow.
Yeah, I hear you.
I've got a title slide and I now need to try and rough something together. But I'm like very much like you, Peter. I just have a few slides, most talks, just to highlight some key points and then go into demos for most of it or such. Because I think talking through like virtual events is a lot different to in person. In person, you probably have lots of slides because people can focus on you and so on. Whereas virtual event, you probably don't want people looking at slides the whole time. And I'm always worried that death by PowerPoint. Everyone always says that. And like people being bored, just like, oh, not another slide. Oh, here's a load of things on here. And I remember at not Teams Nation Gone, but the previous Teams Nation, I moderated there, and Dux did an amazing talk about presenting. And just from watching that, I was like, right, I'm scrapping everything I've done before. This has really helped me around how to organize your presentation, what to have on slides, how to introduce things. And that really, really helped me massively when I started talking more at events.
And that's Dux Raymond Tsai, isn't it?
Yes,
Who's a fellow Microsoft MVP. I don't even mention his name in the same breath as me because he's just absolute legend. And he's a branding legend, and he works for AvePoint or AvePoint, doesn't he? And what a guy! We must try and get him to join us on the show at some point for sure. But
not after this one, because I know no one want to watch.
No, there's room for everyone. That's what we always say about the show. We want everyone on this show. We want new community members. We want established community members. We want the legends. We want to get them all, and get that balance across the spectrum. And a final thing on the community then and the MVP journey. Is it worth it? Would you say, what would your advice be to anyone considering getting involved in that Microsoft community and perhaps even trying to become an MVP?
Yeah, it's definitely worth it. And I think that the bit that's worth it isn't necessarily the award. It's actually the community. And it's going to sound cheesy as hell saying that, but it's actually the people in the community. So like, remember looking at it thinking, right, there's the goal, there's the MVP award that we want to try and achieve it and work my way towards it. But actually, meeting people along the way and talking to people, becoming in like the community groups with people, it's just everyone's just so nice. I had not like an expectation of people being like wanting to be the best and I'm a great MVP because I do this or something like that. And it's not like that at all. Not at all. But everyone's just normal people, helpful people, and I think that's the thing that surprised me most is actually people want to help you get to where you want to be. So in the MVP. Everyone's so nice and inviting you into events, helping you out with talking if you want advice and talking, how to up yourself in the community and what to do and blogging and such. That everyone's just really, really helpful. And I think that's what's made it worthwhile. It is hard work doing it. I mean, doing the contributions, recording things, having that extra effort of thinking, I haven't done anything this week. I really should perhaps do a blog, do a video, do something. But I think that the goal shouldn't be actually the award. The goal should be embedding yourself in that community with the people around it. And I think that's what is the most worthwhile part for me.
Nice one. Yeah. And I mean, at the end of the day, a badge is a badge, you know what I mean? And it's not worth it if you're suffering as you're doing it. If you're not made for doing the kind of community contributions and stuff like that, you don't want to go through hell just to get a label, and I mean, when I think one of the things that comes up a lot in this show, you don't just come out of high school and go straight to being an MVP. You don't just come out of high school and go straight to being that kind of technical consultant. You're obviously focusing at the minute on adoption of Teams and the Microsoft 365 suite. How did you get into IT in the first place? Where did you start on this crazy path?
Yeah. So when I was at school, wasn't the best of pupils at school. Like academically wise, seen as never going to have qualifications to the point where some teachers even said, we're not going to put you in for GCSEs because you're not going to get anything. Did all right in my GCSEs and came out with some nice grades. I actually stayed on to do sixth form at school. Never should have done that. But it's maybe where I am now today. I just messed up 2 years of my life messing about in sixth form. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. I enjoyed cars, liked tinkering with cars, always had a keen passion around computers and IT. But when I left, I actually got a job at a garage and I lasted 2 weeks and walked out because manual labor isn't for me. So I was there for 2 weeks and walked out. And I was like, I think I was 19 at the time, didn't have a job. It's like, well, what the hell do I want to do in my life? I didn't have a clue. My family's all education based. So both my parents were teachers, both my sisters are teachers.
Right.
So I was like, I don't really want to go down that avenue because I've seen how the teaching life takes over everything of your life. That is you. And I remember the local authority was looking for a technician in IT. And I was like, I like computers. I'll apply for it. So I applied for it. And it was supposed to be not an apprentice, because there wasn't really apprenticeships around then. It was like a trainee technical IT person. And I got the job, but I didn't get any training. So like, I remember after my second week of like shadowing a couple of people, no training, just, you know, getting used to visiting different schools. It was at the time, going to different schools. And there's like, right, here's your 5 schools you're going to look after. Away you go. I was like, well, I don't really know what I'm doing. At the time, I didn't really understand what an IP address was. And then, I mean, luckily servers didn't exist in those days in primary schools. They tend to have like 2 RM Nimbus machines or old XP and 3.1 machines. But yeah, sort of built my way up from there. And it wasn't until I had kids really that I actually thought I need to make a career out of what I'm doing rather than just turning up for work every day, getting the paycheck and going home and whatever. So when my wife came pregnant, was it 11 years ago? I was like, right, I'm having a family. I need to actually look at what I want to do in my life, what career-wise. So that's when I started to work my way up that IT career path from your normal technician to becoming a server installations manager. So I was in charge of doing server installations, and it was a great time for it because everyone had what was our CC3 networks. Anyone in education would know those, and we were putting them into Windows vanilla. So we had about 200 schools to do in 2 years, and then went on to being a manager there. And once I fell into the Microsoft world of things because one of the schools I worked with was a Microsoft Showcase school. So they were big in the Microsoft world of things. I think there's only 6 at the time in the country. So that the head teachers are like, Paul, we really need help with OneNote and what was the other? Classroom at the time, Microsoft Classroom. It sort of fizzled out. But there was those 2 applications I really need help with, a little bit of SharePoint, and we started building it from there. And then I got speaking to different people in the education team at Microsoft and started to path myself, like I said, in that community, which is where I met people in Hable. And then they were like, right, you're not wasted in education, you're doing well in education, but you can do so much more rather than just focusing on the education world of things. And I thought, nah, that's scary. I'm comfortable here in my little school environment, working with schools. And I remember I was at Hable for, I think it was less than a month. And I'd only ever worked in education all my life, in like a real job. But I had to go and speak at a local council in front of like 100 people in the council about to go down the 365 adoption journey. And it was like, why should they use 365? Hadn't really done much public speaking in that sense. And out of my comfort zone, because it was in education. And did the talk. And it was like, since then, it was like, yeah, it's this same thing. People just want to use technology to make their lives easier with what it is they do day in, day out. And it was just that. That's where the journey has gone from someone who didn't know what they wanted to do to where I am today.
And, you know, funny that how you kind of mentioned that for you, it was kind of pregnancy that was the kind of the boot up the unmentionable to kind of start getting serious about things. Is that, you know, that's kind of something we've discovered in a lot of these chats, is that folk just kind of seem to be plodding along, and then all of a sudden something serious happens, and that's when they have to start getting serious. Was it then a decision that, yeah, I'm going to focus on the Microsoft stuff then, or was that kind of just by chance because that's what you were already working with?
Yeah, it was just by chance, really. I mean, I was actually a Google trainer before I was involved in Microsoft, so I'd actually was quite heavily involved in Google. And it's just because the company I worked for, we'd partnered up with a Google partner, and we're doing lots with Chromebooks and Google for Education and stuff like that. And then, like I said, this school that was a Microsoft school got me heavily involved there. And that's when I was like, well, actually, I was always Windows man, never a Mac or anything like that. But it was a bit like, actually, the OneNote was fantastic for education, the class notebook and stuff like that. It was real life-changing for teachers. That's where my focus went. And then just as time went on, Teams came along, and it's just like, well, this is definitely life-changing for how people are working. And it's just been along that journey. So, I mean, yeah, I was probably about 7, 8 years, probably like heavily embedded in the Microsoft world of things. Cool.
You mentioned Google there. Now, Google are massive in education, obviously. Obligatory boo for Google, by the way.
With you on that one.
Thank you. I mean, what's your kind of experience as far as when should someone choose the Microsoft stuff over the Google stuff? Other than just saying all the time, because that's what we need to say. Do they have instances where, the Google stuff is the better option? I mean, I know that when I think of Chromebooks, I think of there's obviously a price incentive there compared to your typical Windows thing. But in terms of the productivity suite, what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is the pricing that drives Google, especially in education. Schools have no money. And that's a big thing we saw. They couldn't afford £400 or £500 on a laptop when they could go and buy a Chromebook for 200.
Yeah,
I know a few years ago, Microsoft did the big push on affordable devices with the Windows 10, wasn't it? The light version, but it was just a bit like, it really wasn't. It was just a bad Windows machine, really, more than anything else. It worked and did stuff, but the management side of Google was a lot better still in that sense, and that's what sort of drove it in the education world. In the business world, I can't see why anyone would go Google, and I've not come across anyone using it in the business world of things. But the Microsoft product suite, especially in 365, is just so much better, and it's what people like. My argument always was in education is like, you can set people up with Google, it's cheaper and affordable and stuff. But when these students go into the real life working world, it's very unlikely they're going to be using Google Docs or Google Sheets. They're going to be using Excel. They're going to be using Word. So it's similar, but the confusion is going to come in with the functionality. They're all used to working on a web-based version, and then it'd be great if everyone was using the web-based version of 365 now. It would save us a lot of aggro, but everyone still is in the installed version of Excel, installed version of Word, and so on.
I think that'll come as well, though, with 365 in time. I think the progressive web apps, our good friend Kevin McDonnell, and now also fellow MVP, congratulations to him. Well, very well deserved indeed. But he and I were chatting the other day on Twitter and with someone else about the fact that he runs exclusively the Outlook in progressive web app. He doesn't have the full fat Outlook client on there, and I've not tried that yet, but I'm going to give it a go now and see if I can run with that. But he says he's never looked back, and that's the way it's going to go, isn't it? For sure.
Yeah. I mean, the web ones are brilliant. They're a lot better than what they were going back a couple of years ago. Yeah. Especially with the integration of Teams. I mean, I rarely go into desktop versions of the apps. I tend to spend most of my time in Teams, but I do simple things. I'm not doing big complicated spreadsheets, and I think that's where there's still that need, isn't there? The desktop one, if you've got that big spreadsheet of macros and all these fancy formulas that I don't understand, but what people tend to set up. You've got that sort of intensive things.
I do take your point on Google Classroom, though. I mean, my oldest son George, his school uses Google Classroom, and in the recent lockdown, we got that all set up for him. I mean, his fellow pupils, if they didn't have a computer, they were issued with Chromebooks, which seems to work well. We got him an iPad, with a little keyboard on it, and that worked brilliantly for him, and it worked really well. I thought this is pretty good. But as you say, in the business world, I think on one occasion in my career over the past 5 years, I've come across one customer that I dealt with who wanted to go the other way, to 365 to Google, and like I had to sort of like bite my lip and not say, "Are you mad?" But we've had plenty in my experience wanting to go the other way from Google to 365, but not so much the other way.
yeah, very similar to that. I don't think I've even come since working at Hable. Google hasn't even been mentioned anywhere at all, unless someone's using Google Drive like it's a shadow IT. That's a big no-no to try and get around something that someone set up in security and compliance side of things. But I don't think I've come across, like you, Peter, we do a lot of transition from Google to something, but never the other way around. I can understand why you'd want to go the other way around.
It's mad, isn't it? Speaking of Teams and integration of things like Google Drive, I mean, you can add in the file section in Teams other file storage things like Google Drive, like Ignite, which I don't have a clue what that is, but that was the most recently added one. And Dropbox, and what's the other one? Is it Box?
Box, yeah.
And do you see much call from your customers to add in those file storage into Teams?
No, when we do governance workshops, it's like, here's what files you can have within Teams. We suggest you flick all these off. Just because you don't know what data is going to be in there, and you want to encourage people to keep it in your infrastructure of what you've got control of, or what your governance is about. And if they're bringing in these third-party drives or Dropboxes or boxes, who knows what data, who has access? And that's always a big concern for me around that. I mean, I can see why Microsoft have done it to try and include other areas that people might use, but I always think it's a bit risky, isn't it? If you've got that sensitive information and you suddenly got a Dropbox up there and someone puts it in the wrong folder, who's got access to that Dropbox?
Also, just the, sorry to be the typical Scottish guy, but even just the price of, licensing all these different things, it blows my mind. I mean, you get, even on I think you get it at the minimum with E3, but you get OneDrive for Business Plan 2, I think, which gives you something like 5 terabytes to start with, and then up to 25 terabytes per user. So it's like, you imagine how much you'd have to pay for these other services when you're already paying for it as part of Office 365. That's what blows my mind when I see other folks using the Dropboxes and the Box and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I remember a customer that they were big users of Box. This is why they're experimenting to use Teams and OneDrive and stuff, and they had Exchange and 365, but that's all they were using. We're having discussions with him. It's like, well, why are you storing this stuff in Box? Oh, it's great. You can share stuff. You can collaborate. You can do this. Like, that's what 365 is. And like, I never realized we were just using it as an email system. So I bet there's many more people out there that are similar. Like, maybe I got 365 and just use Exchange, and then are using these boxes and such.
It's still so common, isn't it? A lot of people don't know what they've got with 365. They think it is just basically Office and email. It's amazing that there's still that perception amongst some people, without a doubt.
Yeah, definitely.
One of the things that I've found is that the way these things can kind of start to seep into organizations is that the folks involved in the buying process aren't necessarily always involved in either the IT or the actual adoption, insofar as, just as an example, I know that with some mobile telephony companies, your O2s, your Vodafones and things like that, they will also resell that stuff in the same way they'll sell Office 365. So for a lot of sales folks, there's the incentive to sell the license to Dropbox and Box.
Yeah.
The folks that are responsible for the buying, they buy it, and then IT are like, well, we bought it, so we should probably use it.
Yeah.
Oh, you've just made me think of vendors who sell 365, and the absolute worst example of that. I hope they're not listening and sue me or anything, but have you ever come across a GoDaddy Office 365 tenant? Oh my gosh, they are awful. Absolutely awful. It's just no administrative control over them, so difficult to get customers out of them. It's just a horrendous experience. Ugh. Just yuck.
They create loads of random objects in GoDaddy tenants that you wouldn't find in other ones and things like that. Yeah, it gets messy. It's funny because GoDaddy is one of those ones, they're crazy big, massive organization, and yet universally derided. Nobody has anything good about to say with them. So you're kind of like, how do these guys get so big? But they must be doing something right, I guess. I don't know what it is. Yeah.
So these people in Scotland buying it.
Touche.
It'd be called Go Jimmy. So, I mean, one of the things you mentioned was how you'll take customers out of the Google Enterprise environment and you'll bring them into Microsoft 365 and Teams. In your work at Hable, what is a kind of typical day, if there is one? What does a kind of adoption consultant do?
Yeah, so like what Hable is known for is exactly like that adoption consultancy piece. We do a lot of getting people into Teams, making sure the organization uses it in the right way, training, guides, and so on. The area of the business that I sort of head up is our technical side, which is quite new in the business. So we've always had a couple of technical people, including myself, within Hable. But I mean, when I joined, I didn't join as a technical person at all. I joined as a trainer, and that was what I was doing, delivering Teams training, SharePoint, OneDrive, whatever it would be. And it's similar with the other technical people. We didn't have official technical consultants within the organization. We did stuff. We did like migrations and touched on SharePoint and such. But during the pandemic, everyone started using Teams, and we've seen a lot of people on Microsoft Teams, and we noticed a big gap of organizations' technical capability and being able to help them. So that's when we set up this technical area of the business, which has developed now into what we call building smarter workplaces. So we're sort of going through a rebranding internally in the organization. But we typical sort of day for me is a lot of sales calls or planning calls with customers and such, that I don't do as much as delivery as I used to now, because I do a lot of planning, working with the customer to discover what they want, running governance workshops, running SharePoint workshops, and so on like that. And then we've got people in the technical team who build Power Apps and build very good Power Apps. We've got teams as the platform stuff, so using some of those Microsoft app templates, bots. We've deployed bots. I mean, the biggest bot we did was in NHS Wales, and we deployed like a Teams bot. So if anyone had any problems with Teams or wanted to know how to arrange a meeting, send a message, whatever it is, they could ask the bot and it would come back with the questions and stuff. What we are seeing, I don't know if you guys or people watching, is everyone's wanting SharePoint at the minute. We're sort of going around this big loop of, it used to be SharePoint, everyone wanted Teams, and now we're coming back round, everyone's now wanting SharePoint. And I think last week, I think out of the 5 customer calls I was on, 4 of them were SharePoint builds and intranets and migrations and so on like that. And we're seeing a massive thing, and that's something I am doing a lot of, is working with organizations to shape the structure and the look and feel of SharePoint, and then actually implementing that and designing it. And the stuff that's coming out of SharePoint is fantastic at the minute. I just think it's getting better and better. And I mean, the Viva aspect, Microsoft with like the sneaky rebrand of SharePoint intranets of everyone needs Viva connections without calling it SharePoint. Very clever by Microsoft on that point. But I just think there's such a demand for that, especially like the hybrid working that people are going to be facing. And that's where a lot of our focus, I think, is going to be in the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, SharePoint's had a definite resurgence. I find I work a lot with SharePoint myself, and I found exactly the same. A lot of people will come and ask me, well, we're on these older file servers with just information all over the place. What can we do to get that into Microsoft 365? And what's always 9 times out of 10 that will usually go into SharePoint more than it will into Teams, because it's the more static content, the more departmental content for organizations like your traditional sales, marketing, purchasing, those pillars of functions that are always going to be there tend to sit better in SharePoint. And the more dynamic projects and teams, there's that word again, will fit better into Teams. But then, of course, it's win-win, because you got that great integration between Teams and SharePoint, and the files that you have in Teams have that, I hate this term, but don't ever know quite what else to call it, that back-end SharePoint site where they reside. But so much overlap on those things, and then there's things like SharePoint syntax coming in now, which I absolutely love to bits. The only thing that I don't particularly like about syntax is that you have to buy a separate license for it. It doesn't sit particularly well with me. I think it probably should be added in as part of one of the E3s or the E5s. It just feels messy, but syntax is so good. The ability to do a bit of artificial intelligence and machine teaching and applying compliance with retention labels, sensitivity labels, so much good stuff. And SharePoint's back with in a big way. It's far from dead. Far from dead.
I think it's because everyone wanted that communication platform, didn't they? When went into the first lockdown, a lot of organizations panicked and sort of jumped on board of Teams and other platforms, and started over the 12 months really built their way of communicating and collaborating in that sense. But they still had file shares, they still had traditional ways of working in the background, that all this meetings and stuff was happening in Teams, but still people were working in local storage, I guess is what we call it, on servers and stuff. Whereas now it's like, we've seen how great 365 is for that element. We know it can do other stuff. Let's start bringing that in. And that's what we're seeing is probably a lot of the organization we work with. You speak to them about Teams. We do like a lot of workshops called How You Work workshops, where we go really in depth into looking at how people are working, what they're doing, and then try and map out solutions around 365. And from a lot of these different organizations across all different sectors, because I work across different sectors, they're all the same thing, that a lot of them are still using Teams for chat, meetings, and that's it. They're not really working in Teams. Teams has become their new version of Skype or whatever they used before, which is working great, but they're not really making use of the teams and channels and so on like that. And that's the big thing we find.
One of the things I'll pick up on that you mentioned was you've got a lot of interest in on folk now. They've got SharePoint, probably made more aware of it through the use of Teams, and they're interested in things like intranets and stuff like that. Now, in my head, not being a SharePoint guy, when I think of intranets, I think of kind of early 2000s era websites that tell me where I can find my pension plan and stuff like that. How does the intranet exist in a modern environment, and how does that contrast to all the stuff that Teams does and that Viva does?
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? It's you don't want that traditional intranet, like you say, of this is my pensions and these are our policies. It needs to be new, and I think that's what Viva does, makes it new and shiny, because it brings in, people will hate me saying it, but Yammer. And I think Yammer is going to be big, I think, again, with this hybrid way of working, because it separates the work from the community, like, you know, the non sort of work topics, I find, which works really well. But like Viva Connections, I think it's going to be massive for building those new modern SharePoint sites, because it's personal to you. Those intranets, sorry, not SharePoint sites. It's personal to you, isn't it? It's surfacing that information that is not standard for everyone. Everyone doesn't land on the same page, and it's the same news articles, the same links, and so on. It's building something that I land in it, and it's built around me. It's what I can see. It's like my documents, news related to me, my conversations in Yammer, other bits. I mean, the cards that are coming, I think, in Viva are going to really transform things with these adaptive cards and such. I think that's really going to change a lot around what we can build. I know it's not there yet. Some people have got previews and stuff, but I'm really interested to see what capability that brings in around bringing in the insights information, it telling you about yourself, bringing in learn and stuff like that. It needs to be a lot more than just this is our company information. It's like trying to bring in all the different connections in together of all these different aspects of the way it works. So Yammer, Teams, personal stuff, files, whatever it may be, and bringing it all into this like landing portal hub, however we want to brand it, and accessing it from there.
Right.
Yeah, and it's so easy to spin one of these up now. There's a site that Microsoft have there, the SharePoint Lookbook site. It's basically lookbook.microsoft.com, I think it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is the link to that. And you can go into there and look at all the different types of intranets and the reasons why they would be there, what the web parts and the pages are included on those. And then you can just, I like that one. We'll put that in our tenant, and boom, it's there in a few minutes. And you can go in and customize that, brand it with your logo and your color schemes, and do lots of stuff with PowerShell to make it look the way you want it to look. And then, as you were saying there, Paul, you can customize those pages to what the individual user needs and wants to see, and you use the audience targeting feature for that, which is a really powerful thing that can be applied to many and more evolving SharePoint web parts, which make up a SharePoint page, basically. So it's so much more powerful than it used to be in the days of the old classic SharePoint team site experiences, which were far less capable. And this is why you had organizations who would look to go for an intranet in a box solution in front of or instead of SharePoint. You don't need to do that now. You can really make something that looks really, really amazing out of the box so quickly and easily, and secure and audience targeted.
Yeah, and I think that's what that traditional thing, wasn't it? Everyone wanted SharePoint, but to have it not look like SharePoint.
Yeah.
And there's so many companies out there who charge a fortune to put skins on and all that thing to make it not look like SharePoint. But exactly like you said there, Peter, it's SharePoint now looks sexy, it looks good, it looks nice, with some simple things around it. It can still look old SharePoint-ish, if that's the way people have designed it. But some of the stuff in there now, it just makes it so easy for a user. You don't need to be a web designer and stuff to throw it together, because I have no web design skills at all, but yet can still throw in a few boxes and a few web parts and make things look a lot nicer.
I always get disappointed when customers come to me and say, we're not bothered about all of the bells and whistles and making it look pretty and all that. We just want our data in there. And can you do a nice just lift and shift for us? No, please don't ask me to do that. You're just going to cause more problems for yourself because SharePoint has list thresholds. And if you're listening to this and you're planning this journey, please don't do that. You need to think carefully about how your data is going to go into SharePoint. It's a perfect opportunity to start from scratch and not make all the mistakes that you've made in the past and take across with you the problems that you have in the existing world. So, but yeah, a lot of people just want their data in there quickly and easily, and it's really not the way to go.
No, you're just moving the same problems you have, but into a different platform, and then people are going to be like, "Oh, SharePoint's just the same. It doesn't work. It doesn't. We can't find anything. There's no organization." Like, yeah, because you've just moved. It's like moving a room, isn't it? If you've got a messy room, moving to another room in the same mess. You're like, well, I've not changed anything. It's still the same room.
And as the IT person, in any organization, from day one of a new product launch of going live with something, the last thing you want is users not getting on board with it and coming, well, the old system was better than this, and that is the nightmare words that IT people never want to hear. Oh, why is it so slow? Okay.
Turn it off and on again.
I guess speaking of slow, then one of the things that does come up a lot with Teams is the performance of it, insofar as I'll open Task Manager and Teams is just devouring anything it can get its hands on. Is there anything that folks need to do to kind of optimize Teams, or is it just a case of, let's just buy better hardware?
Probably the second option. Microsoft can do something. There's talk, isn't there, of the Teams Lite version coming out, isn't there? Right. I know there was rumors previously around that. Whether it will, I don't know, but Teams can be very resource friendly, and I think it's just the tip would just be make sure you're closing it, restarting your machine on regular occurrences. I know probably 12 months or so ago, I'd had halfway through a day I'd have to restart my laptop, just because going into meetings you would always get real bad connectivity problems, but only in Teams. Like everything else was fine. Do a speed test and stuff, all other things working fine. Giving it that quick restart, just clearing the memory, I guess, helped massively. But no, I think that's something Microsoft have got to tackle, isn't it? Is the performance of Teams, because it's getting bigger and bigger, and obviously the resources it's taking is getting bigger and bigger too. It's only going to get bigger. So I don't know how they're going to tackle that.
And they had a lot of unexpected problems with COVID, obviously, because a few shows ago we had the amazing Laurie Potmeyer on from Microsoft, and she was saying when the pandemic hit, they understandably had to turn some things off due to the demand on it, and then gradually turn them all back on. So, in my opinion, Microsoft coped amazingly with that whole situation and just did a really, really great job. If you're coming into Teams now, in my opinion, if you're planning your Teams journey, there are things you can do. You can look in the Teams Admin Center and look at the Network Planner tool and try and plan what that experience is going to be like for your organization. And also, when you get started, if you have performance issues in meetings and video quality, that sort of thing, jitter, those sort of issues. Look at the quality of service settings in the meeting policies and settings as well. Meeting settings, that would be, and there are all things you can try and do and tweak. But yeah, I think in time there'll be more that comes into that, and Microsoft are always looking to improve and make the product better for everyone to use.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've come across quite a few problems with Teams in the past 6 or so months, and it's never been Teams. It's always been drivers.
Graphics drivers. About that.
Graphic drivers have driven me insane in video ones, and it's nothing to do with Teams or performance of Teams. It's always been drivers that completely screwed things up. So I mean, that could be other issues people face out there. It may not be Teams, but they're saying it's Teams because that's the thing they're in day out. That's what they're using. So you do. I mean, if you're in Outlook, you say, "Oh, Outlook's slow, isn't it?" In the old days, it takes ages to send an email. It takes ages to do this because that's what people are in. People are working in that all the time. Whereas now their experience is always in Teams, and it's running slow. It's not doing as it should. Doesn't help you've got Edge open with 50 million tabs, and it's probably your machine that's running slow and Teams not doing anything. But yeah,
I guess shifting gears a wee bit then, and as far as kind of stuff outside of community and MVP and teams and things, because one of the problems, speaking to you MVP folks, you just work. So one of the other things that we kind of talk about in this show is what do you do outside of work to kind of disconnect from it? I feel like there's a wee bit of a spoiler going by what's on your wall in the background.
Hey, tune.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a pleasure of mine outside of work, because most of the time it brings depression more than anything else supporting this team. But it's a roller coaster of emotion. But yeah, no, a big Newcastle fan and football follower. I mean, football's always been a passion of mine since I was a kid. And just now everything's football. If I'm not working, it's something football, whether it's watching football. And a big thing my wife hates is she'll be like, why are you watching this game? It's not even Newcastle. It's like, yeah, but it's football. I'll watch it. Like, I mean, I remember when obviously football was cancelled during COVID, I was like moping around for months. Like, God, there's nothing on. Why is there no football? And then I think it was it the Australian football, might have been Japanese football, suddenly appeared. And I was like, I'm watching this. At least it's football. That's good for me. And then obviously the German football was one of the first ones. But now football's a big passion. I coach my son's football team as well, so that takes up a lot of my time. So if I'm not working, not doing MVP stuff, I'm planning coaching sessions, planning matches and stuff like that. We had a game this morning, so that's my weekend. You have to get down early, put the goals up, do all that sort of thing, make sure all the kids are all right. And then manage the team through it and plan all your sessions. That does take a lot of time up as well. Lego is a good thing. It is a good thing for turning off. So I like buying Lego now and then, not massively, but just now and then treat myself to something, and it's just switch off from everything. I'm just going to build this Lego set for the next hour, 2 hours, just turn off from anything. Running has been a big thing as well. I found really helpful in just getting outdoors, because that's one thing. So from working from home, I went from someone that worked in offices or out remote working. Even when I went to Hable, it's still a lot of on the road working, staying in hotels, working away and stuff, to then working from home. It was such a massive change for me. Like just being in a room with four walls, no one to talk to, and so on. So I took up running just to get outdoors, and thoroughly enjoyed it. I used to hate running. If anyone ever asked me to do one sport and say, "Oh, you should do running," I'd be like, "No, far too lazy for that." And then I did take up running and got really into it. Started running some big like half marathons and stuff like that, distance wise, and ended up with an injury. And people are like, "It's because you're not stretching, you're not doing exercise, you're not doing so." I took up running because it's one of those sports where you don't need to buy anything; you can just run.
Yeah.
And then they're like, "You need to do this on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. You should be doing this sort of yoga, this sort of stretching, this sort of thing." I was like, "This has turned into a lot of effort. I just want to go out and run," and that's why I took it up.
Yep. It seems loads of folks seem to have taken up running, especially over COVID, like you said, because I guess it's one of those things injuries aside and things like that, maybe it is one of those things you can just get up and go and start doing. You know what I mean? You've already got all the stuff. I mean, I know it was actually just before COVID hit, I was listening to David Goggins' book on a flight back from Heathrow. David Goggins is a kind of ultra marathoner guy, and he did something like a 205-mile run in 40 hours or something like that. And he talks about how his limbs basically all started breaking and all that kind of stuff, and he just suffered through it. But yeah, the running's something that I've tried a few times. I actually had COVID back in March last year, and I found that the running helped the recovery a little bit of it, because it got the lungs kind of forced them to start doing work and stuff like that. But yeah, it's I know what you mean. I still have that perception as far as running, not for me. But I'll do it because it's an easy thing you can just pick up, I guess.
Yeah.
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, Paul, though, getting back to Newcastle very, very briefly, because for those who may not know, I'm also a Newcastle United fan. Not so much as I used to be because of the sheer pain of it, basically. But I'm more of a fan from the sort of 90s and early 2000s. And Shearer, in those days, Alan Shearer is the greatest footballer ever, in my opinion. No. Fact, you're wrong if you don't think otherwise. If the same, so
record sheets show it.
Yeah, well, they do. Yeah, all-time leading Premier League goal scorer.
Yeah.
So, but what's your prognosis for the team at the moment, Paul, and their prospects for the coming season?
I think a lot of it lies on the takeover, doesn't it? For those of you who don't know, who are listening, Newcastle is one of these clubs where fans have a great expectation of wanting to see good football and not necessarily winning trophies, because we're not winning trophies for God knows how long, but just having good football. And something we haven't had for a long time is good football. Yeah. And we've had an owner, haven't we, Mike Ashley, who's sort of ripped out the insides of the club, and so many people have drifted away from supporting it. I mean, Peter, maybe that's part of the factor of why you've drifted off from supporting them. But yeah, I mean, during COVID, one of the big talks was around the takeover, and it was like, is it happening? Is it not? Is it happening? And it went on for months. And I remember I'm one of these people supporting Newcastle. It was always a downer. It was always like, nah, it's never going to happen. No, don't believe it. I never believe anything. When Newcastle play, we'll lose. Never optimistic in anything when it comes to the club. But no, I mean, looking to the future, if there is that buy, I mean, the end of this month, they're saying could still be on the cards, but I can't see it happening. But they just need to get away from being one of those clubs that are scrapping for relegation every year. And that's all fans want, isn't it? Is just not shifting it down there mid-table. Happy with that.
Yeah,
anything higher would be a loaded bonus, but it'd be nice. I mean, it's funny because I know everyone talks about well-being and looking after yourselves and stuff, and I think supporting Newcastle is one of those biggest things that affects well-being more than anything else. Because especially if they play on a Friday, I find my weekend is ruined. Because we always lose. Play on a Friday, always lose. That's it. Next 2 days, I'm like, bloody rubbish. If we play a Sunday evening, however, if we lose, it doesn't matter. I've had a nice weekend. I'm already looking to work the next day anyway. So it's like, for me, supporting Newcastle is a huge pain point. And I wouldn't, if any people out there who are into football and don't follow a club and thinking of following Newcastle, don't do it. Find another club. You don't need to go through this pain.
I can attest to that for sure. And I used to go to the games. I had a season ticket for many years at St James's Park, and I'm the very sort of high and low emotional roller coaster. I enjoyed the highs, but I found the lows very, very difficult. So if we won on a Saturday, I would be happy. I would come home. I would watch Match of the Day on Saturday night. I'd want to just devour all of the content. I'd get the Sunday papers. Yes, read it all. If we lost, I wouldn't watch Match of the Day. I would be down. I wouldn't want to know about football until next week. Proper opposing forces there. But it makes me very sad, the state of the club these days, when we're thinking back to the days of Kevin Keegan being manager the first time, and Sir Bobby Robson, who what a guy.
Yeah,
but
amazing.
Anyhow, we'll get off our soapbox and not bore our listeners too much with that any longer. But let's get to the all important question. And if you don't mind, Roo, I've never asked this before.
All right, go for it. I didn't realize I hogged the question. Yeah, you go.
No, I'd like to. So, do you like watching movies first and foremost? And if so, the all important question that we have started to ask all of our guests is Terminator 1 or Terminator 2?
I am a big movie watcher. Don't ask me who actors are and stuff like that, because I've got a mind of a sieve. I recognise them, like, they're in that film from, when was that I saw them? And then straight away on Wikipedia looking it up. But talking about Terminator, it's funny because I'm a big Arnold Schwarzenegger fan. He's one of my favourite actors, to the point where my dog's called Arnie.
Cool.
But that Terminator 1 or 2, I'd have to go Terminator 2.
But
I've got a question.
Excellent.
Have you seen the newer ones? The new ones of Terminator?
I've seen the one where it was kind of a remake of the first one with CGI, like a different take on it, wasn't it?
Yeah,
when they went back to 1984. I've seen that one, and I've seen Terminator 3. And isn't there another one with Christian Bale that I've not seen that one?
Yeah.
I've not seen that one.
Because I didn't even know they existed. I knew Terminator 3 and the one after that. I didn't know the others. And I watched Terminator 2 with my son recently. I didn't realise we watched like this extended version that was really long. It was like 3.5 hours long. God knows. And I was like, I don't remember this in the original. But then my son was like, can we watch another one? And I had a look, and I was like, oh, I didn't even know these ones existed. We watched them, and I can't remember which one it was, but one of them was really good. But then, like you say, they've got that one which goes back, so like straight after Terminator 2, and like John Connor dies, and it all changes. And I'm like,
it's weird, isn't it?
What's happened? How was this one followed on from
you got to love Arnie, though. One of my absolute favorite Arnie films from the mid-90s is True Lies. You seen that one?
Brilliant film, brilliant. My favorite's Commando.
Oh yes, Commando. What a film!
That's a brilliant.
So many great lines in that movie.
That's probably my all-time favorite Arnie film. Just the fact that he hides behind flower pots and doesn't manage to get shot by about 5,000 people. Don't know how he does it, but he's behind little flower pots and he does not get shot. So that takes some skill.
It's a great film to watch if you're in a bit of a mood, isn't it? If you're in a bit of a and you want to get some rage out, it's fantastic. Absolutely love it. Spot on. Well, another one for Terminator 2. That is amazing. So
yeah, I was trying to think what the tally is now. I think T2 is winning. I'm not.
I think it's winning.
Sure.
I think it's winning. I think we've had one Terminator 1, which was Cat, and a lot for 2, and a lot for I Don't Know, I Don't Care. So
well, they shouldn't be allowed on the show.
Exactly. Well, they are told that they won't be invited back
until they've watched it.
Exactly. Exactly. Learn the error of your ways. But very, very conscious of time. We could talk all day. It's always the case with our great guests, and this is no exception. But let's give you some time back, as they say on Teams calls. I can't believe I just used that. Paul, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show with us today. Thank you so much for joining us. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we close, and how can people reach you if they want to get in touch?
I just want to say, guys, Rue and both of you, it's just brilliant what you're doing here. Love tuning into these. I often watch them after, like, during the week while I'm working. I'll put it on and listening. It's just brilliant. So keep it up, you two. Fantastic stuff by you both.
Nice. Appreciate that.
And if anyone does want to reach out on, I'm on Twitter, Mr. Paul Dredge, on LinkedIn as well. Same thing, search Paul Dredge on LinkedIn. And that's the best way to get hold of me if you want to after this.
Absolutely amazing. Yeah, give the guy some love. He's a Newcastle fan. He's going to be down a lot of the time. So
exactly. I'll have a nice summer, but
yeah. Okay, well, this has been Cloud Conversations, Rue and Pete. I got the name of the show right this time. Episode 13. I can't believe it's 13, as I said at the start. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Do give us a follow on Twitter. We are at Cloud Rue and Pete. You can see our Twitter handles on the screen there as well if you want to follow us personally. And please do give us a follow on YouTube as well, and a like and subscribe, and give that notification button a tickle and all that good stuff. So let's close this one out, and we will see you on the next exciting episode of Cloud Conversations with Rue and Pete. I've been Pete. This has been Rue, and our wonderful guest, Paul Dredge. Thanks for joining us. Take care.
Cheers, everyone.